Good day, viewers. You're welcome to Let's Discuss program on OSBC TV. My name is Adibare Ejimakide. Today's edition also promises to be revealing and educative. We shall be looking at the state of the nation's economy on the program today. President Bola Tinubu started unveiling some policies in order to improve the economy of the country. He pledged to expand the economy of the country by 6% annually, lift barriers to investment, create jobs, as well as unifying the multiple exchange rate and tackling the insecurity between the country. And I have a guest in the studio that will join me to deliberate on the issue. My guest today on the program is a Don from Osun State University in Osogbo. It is my pleasure welcoming a sociologist, Dr. Gbenga Ajayi. You're welcome on the program.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, sir.
Let's start looking at the state of the economy. How will you describe the state of the nation's economy now?
Well, thank you.
How are Nigerians feeling as regards the economy?
All right, thank you. If you have your hands on the pulse of Nigerians, you realize straight away what is going on. Well, Nigerians are people like you and me, ordinary, everyday citizens. And right now, the main issue in town is the biting hardship as a result of the removal of petrol subsidy. Now, in the past 8 years of the previous administration, we know that some of the misadventures of the previous administration in the economy has pushed many Nigerians into poverty, into hardship. That has been the background that we had before the coming of the present administration. And the coming into power of this present administration, which promised a lot, which you have outlined, now at the inception, the president removed petrol subsidy. That removal of subsidy has further deepened the poverty and the hardship that Nigerians are experiencing. So right now, the economy of the nation is totally unfavorable to everyday citizens, salary earners like you and me. So right now, the main thing is that Nigerians are not finding it funny as regards the economy. It's more costly to live day to day. It's even more difficult to find a means to sustain yourself and your family. So economically, things are not really moving on, are not rosy for Nigerians right now. Just before we started, we were looking at some indices of the economy, of the performance of the Nigerian economy, and we're looking at the fact that about 7 million Nigerians are going to go into further poverty if something is not done about if palliatives are not introduced as a result of the removal of petroleum subsidy. So economically, things are not rosy at all for Nigerians. And as it is, there's no end in sight. That's just the basic truth. Because if something is not done about that situation, then Nigerians are going to be pushed into further poverty. The operative word there is push, because it is the activities, it's the actions and inactions of the government that is causing the poverty in Nigeria. It is not inevitable. It is something that we could have avoided if the government has done what it should have done. But unfortunately, we have governments that would rather play politics than see to the everyday welfare of its citizens. Now, I'm not trying to continue to throw stones at government. It's something that everybody does easily these days. But the facts are there for us to see. Nigeria right now continues to be one of the poorest nations in the world, with the highest number of poor people in the entire world. And right now, nothing yet is still being done to it. Now, the present administration inherited this situation. And because of that terrible, because of the terrible scorecard of the previous administration, this present government has it a little bit easy. If it does any simple thing, and it looks like it has done a lot. So going back to the state of the economy right now, things are not getting any easier. Prices have doubled, even tripled in some cases, because of the removal of petroleum subsidy. There are good sides to that. But for what everyday people like you and me, common people, feel every day, the economy is not feeling fine at all. If your income is fixed and prices are rising, inflation is doubling, and right now we have the highest level of inflation we've ever had in about 19 years. So if income is fixed and inflation is just galloping away, then that tells you that more and more people are being pushed into poverty. Between January and May this year, about 4 million people were further pushed into poverty. Whether you look at poverty in absolute terms or in relative terms, the fact of the matter is that Nigerians are having it very, very, very rough. So something needs to be done very quickly to get the situation under control.
Okay, what are the experience of Nigerians regarding to transportation fares and cost of food items?
That's exactly what we are talking about. The rate of inflation right now is one of the highest in the world, according to all sorts of reports from the Federal Government Bureau of Statistics itself, from the World Bank, from all institutions that are overseeing the economy. The report is that the economy of Nigeria is not performing well at all. If look at you can't stay at home. You have to go out and fend for yourself. So if anything that affects transportation is going to affect everything else, this is elementary. It's something that everybody knows. So if the cost of petroleum has increased, then the knock-on effect is going to be found everywhere else in the economy. And the people that are most vulnerable are people that are at the lower rung of the economic ladder in society. Now, if you are an entrepreneur and you have a very big business, even a medium-sized business, and you can adjust your prices a little bit, well, you can cushion the effect on yourself. But for people who have subsistence businesses, for people who are fixed salary earners, there's almost nothing you can do about that. Before you adjust, you are going to feel the pinch, the impact, the hardship for a long time. So for you to move around now, you have to spend a lot more. And the stories are there with us every day in Nigeria. We see people who are abandoning their cars now to look for alternative means of transportation. I have colleagues at work who don't bring their cars to work anymore. Now people have to carpool. You have to look for colleagues who would share times of bringing their vehicles to work every day. So people are looking for ways to adjust to cope with what is on ground right now. And it's affecting food prices too. Even if you decide you want to cut your moving around, how about feeding? You want to feed yourself, you want to feed your family too. You have children who are growing up and who need good food for proper development, for nourishment and for the development of their brains. So you need good food to take care of them. So if your income is fixed and you're not able to afford the rising costs of food, then that tells you that we have a lot of problems on our hands in Nigeria right now. That's the situation, and it's everywhere. It's just terrible right now.
Okay, like you said in your submission, that the World Bank has indication that 7.1 million Nigerians will be put into poverty if palliative measures are not put in place.
Yes.
What's the way out? What kind of palliative measures should government put in place to serve as a relief from the effects of the subsidy removal? Thank you.
Now, we have been celebrating the removal of subsidy in Nigeria. That's where I want to start from. We've been celebrating it because we see it as a necessary evil. Now, why is it a necessary evil? Because we have a problem with the administration of subsidy in Nigeria.
Okay.
There is nothing wrong with subsidy. Now, governments all over the world subsidizes all sorts of products for its citizens. For example, you find in the West, particularly in America, not America alone, almost all over Europe and in the West of the world, you find them subsidizing petroleum as well as agriculture. These things need to be subsidized so that it can be affordable for everyday common citizens. Now, so there's nothing wrong with subsidy. It's the government helping its citizens to cope with the economy. So it's okay, it's fine. But the problem we have in Nigeria is that the administration of that subsidy regime is poor. So you have people who have no business collecting subsidy from government, collecting it. People just sitting down somewhere, doing nothing, and taking money from the government for doing nothing. And all of this impacts the economy. Somebody somewhere has to pay for it. If the government is paying billions and trillions that are non-existent for services that are not rendered, then it's impacting the economy in very, very negative ways. And that's why you are hearing today that all of a sudden we are hearing reports, even though it's not substantiated yet, we are hearing reports that our consumption of petrol has declined rapidly because people can no longer claim such free money. You remember just about some few days ago, a governor reported that his friend told somebody in power, told the president that we are tired of making money from this subsidy. We are making too much money. One of our northern governors said that. So it's the administration of the subsidy regime that is faulty. Right now, what this government needs to do, since it has decided and it has removed subsidy, is to provide palliatives. Now, what kind of palliatives, you ask? One of the things that should be done immediately without wasting time is to raise the minimum wage. If you are pulling money that is being wasted from subsidy, you have to put it back somewhere where it will reach everyday Nigerians. And that's why you need to think about increasing minimum wage. The NLC initially is arguing with the government that we want 200,000 naira as the minimum wage. Well, whether that is feasible or not, we do not know. But we know that there should be a significant increase in the minimum wage. And then we should be talking about increased efficient transportation systems. Okay. Most of the problems we have in Nigeria about transporting ourselves is because we don't have efficient public facilities. All those facilities that should be on ground are not there. Now look at what's happening. If you want to transport yourself, you are not taking your car out, then you have a whole lot of problems on your hands. You are talking about the road itself, you are talking about the kind of vehicles that will be transporting you. So it's a real big problem for you. Now compare that to what happens in other countries of the world, in more developed countries. You can afford not to take your car out and you are still assured of efficient, effective transportation. If you want to take the rail, if you want to use the railway, there's a time you must get there because the rail will not wait for you. You get there at the right time, you buy your tickets, and then you are off. You can get where you want to go to. Now, as a civil servant here in Nigeria, you just must take your car out if you're lucky enough to have one, or whatever your means of transportation is. That's the most effective way of transporting yourself. But that's not the way it should work. If you are living far away from your place of work, you should have an efficient and effective transportation system such that you can plan your movement. You know what time to get to the train station or to where you get the coach or the bus, and then you get there after you have booked your ticket, like you are going through air, and then you book your ticket, you get there on time, you get on the train, you get where you are supposed to your destination, and then you move out. It's so easy, it's so effortless, it is problem free. So that's one of the areas the government also should look into. And some of that should also go into education, because education is one of the things valued, particularly in the west, in the south of Nigeria. It's one of the things we really value, and a lot of people, a lot of families would rather starve than deny their children of quality education. So the government also should be thinking of providing some palliative in education. One of the fears that many people have now is that this government seems to be poised to eventually increase the cost of tertiary education. And that's something we should avoid, particularly because of our experiences in Nigeria right now. Very quickly, that will take me into the issue of poverty, when we are talking about multidimensional poverty or relative poverty, because one of the indicators of poverty is poor education. So when the government does not provide quality education for its citizens, then you have a deepening of poverty. So the palliative also should include provision of quality education at all levels, primary, secondary, and tertiary. So these are just some of the few areas that the government should look into in providing palliatives for everyday Nigerians.
Okay, government should look into education by providing palliatives.
Yes.
In what ways do you think government should come in? Is it to the benefit of the students, or in terms of facilities, provision of facilities, or whatever?
Now I can guess what you're driving at. It's this issue of the provision of loans for students, student loans. Well, it's a good idea. It's not a bad idea. Let's hope it is well executed. You know, one of the faults that has been identified about Nigeria some time ago by the World Bank, I think, is that we have all these excellent, all these wonderful policies, but the problem has always been with the execution. Now, I know that many people, many agencies and bodies, including ASU, has faulted the idea of student loans, particularly since it looks like the government will be increasing the cost of education for so many people now. So people have been faulting the introduction of loans. Yes, it's true, but the idea is sound. Now, the way it's put down right now may not be the best, but it can always be refined. I think it's the right step in the right direction. Making these facilities available for people that would truly need it would be the right step in the right direction. Now, these things are done all over the world. Now, it doesn't mean that makes it right for us, but if you look at the present situation in Nigeria of many people not being able to afford quality education, the provision of such loans would help people. We just hope, one hopes, that these monies will get to the intended beneficiaries of these monies. Because right now, even before the announcement of that loan, now we have all sorts of scholarship schemes all over Nigeria. But let me tell you the truth, people like you and me usually don't hear about it. I'm privileged to know some of these things because I'm in the academia. Now, for people who are not in the academia, generally don't hear about this, except those in the upper classes, the upper echelons of society. They are the ones who hear about it, who enjoy it. Now, the problem here is that even though they are Nigerians, they are not the ones who need this. It's not intended for them. But the everyday poor, struggling people who need these scholarships for their words to enjoy quality education, they do not hear about it. Even when they hear about it, they are disqualified, they are prevented from benefiting from this program. So that's why I'm saying again that the provision of these loans for students, it's a good thing. Now, where exactly again should the government come in? Now, these answers are there. These are things that we have discussed over and over time in Nigeria. And what we are hoping for is that this government will have the political will to execute some of these things. Look at the case of teachers at all levels, from primary to secondary to tertiary. Now, the condition of teachers is something we all know. We are all aware of it. Teachers are poorly paid. Teachers are not just poorly paid, they are also poorly trained. I read a report recently that many students, when they are offered education courses, they reject it. So our brightest and best don't want to become teachers. So if the brightest and best of our students don't want to become teachers, who becomes teachers? Because we eventually would end up with teachers. Then you have teachers coming from those who are the worst set of our students. They are the worst performing ones, are the ones who eventually end up becoming teachers. And so the cycle of ignorance, of lack of quality, continues over and over. So that's one area the government should look into. Make education attractive for the brightest and the best.
Why do you think they don't like to go for educational courses?
Exactly.
Is it as a result of the economic status of the teachers?
Exactly. It's open. It's obvious. Because when you are looking at your teacher, you know your teacher is suffering. Your teacher is not is not enjoying life. You don't want to do that. In fact, even if you feel like doing it, you have parents at home who are going to warn you. I didn't send you to school to become a teacher. You better look for a better. You have to look for a better course or career to go into. So if teachers are well paid, they don't have to be millionaires. If teachers are well paid, they can afford to live decent lives. They are going to have more people who are going to want to venture into academia, into education. So that's one of the ways by which the government can let these palliatives get into the realm of education.
All right. Now let's look at the challenges facing economic development in the country. Nigerians desires economic reforms, economic transformation. It is the desire of all the people. So what are the challenges that are hindering economic development of the nation as a whole?
Thank you very much for this question. Just as you were asking, I was trying to look at the best way to answer this question. Yes. Well, let's start this way. In 2012, two of the leading economists in the world wrote a book titled Why Nations Fail. And the central thesis of that book, their central argument was that whether a country will be rich or poor does not depend on religion, whether you believe in God or not, whether you pray. It doesn't depend on geography. doesn't depend on health. What really depends on is the institutions of that society. And by that they meant that it's the interplay between the politics and the economy, the economic institution of that nation. In other words, politics and the economy must not interfere with one another.
Okay.
That means, again, for example, that there should be free competition in that society. People must be free to enter into any aspect of society they want to go into and exert themselves, put in their effort, and be assured that nobody will prevent them from getting whatever they are out to get legally. Another thing that it means is that people should be free to practice what is called creative destruction. There should be freedom of competition. Now, the government or the state must not artificially back up any business person to the detriment of other people who want to be players in that same industry. That's one of the arguments that's been made against some of our biggest companies in Nigeria. Okay. You know, some of our biggest businessmen in Nigeria, Dangote to be precise. You know, people have said, this guy is backed up by the state. Allow everybody to compete and let's see if this guy would still be as successful as he is. Now, another thing that should be allowed by the government is that there should be freedom of opportunity for everybody. Now, why am I talking about all this? The problem that we have in Nigeria is that there is too much interference in the economy by the government. And that's why we'll start talking about the CBN eventually. Because the executive arm of government should leave the running of the economy, particularly as it concerns the CBN, should leave the CBN to do what it is set out to do. Once the economy is mixed with politics, then we are going to have a problem, like what we've experienced recently in the recent past in Nigeria. If the government, the executive arm of government particularly, interferes with the running of the economy by the CBN, or if the CBN leaves its core mandate of overseeing and protecting the economy and dabbles into politics, then we have the kind of problem that we have in Nigeria right now. So what the government really should do would be to allow appropriate arms of government, appropriate organs of government to do what they should do and just continue to play its role of supervision. Let me give you an example. Now, one of the faults of the previous administration of the CBN that was identified is that beyond the level of financing or borrowing that should extend to the federal government, this last CBN head went over and beyond it. Right now, the CBN has borrowed, according to some of the latest reports, has borrowed the Nigerian government over 19 trillion naira. 19 trillion, 1.9, almost 20 trillion naira. That's way beyond what the CBN should have allowed the federal government to access. So in effect, the federal government has turned the CBN into like its private purse. Just goes there anytime, asks for money and takes it out and spends. Mind you, that money is not spent in a way that it is bringing back returns into the Nigerian economy. Most of this money eventually ends up as a waste. You would recall that during the period of this last administration, Nigeria, which is suffering, bought vehicles for a neighboring country. I'm sure you would recall that story.
Exactly.
Bought vehicles for a neighboring country. This is a country that has about 133 million of its citizens in multi-dimensional poverty. What business do we have doing something like that? Now, when that happens, the CBN also... And
Nigeria needs that vehicles now.
Thank you. So, you are not providing for transportation for your country. You are going to do Father Christmas for a country that we have no business doing it for. Now, all sorts of arguments were made for why they should have done it. But the fact is, we had no business doing what we did. In fact, coupled with what's happening right now, we're not providing for our own, we are doing Father Christmas somewhere else. So, the CBN, for example, has a limit to which it can borrow the federal government money. The general guideline is that you must not borrow the federal government much more than 5% of its retained revenue of the past year. Okay. Now, what's happening in Nigeria? Nobody's thinking or talking about that. The federal government goes to the CBN anytime, asks for money, withdraws it, and spends without accountability. So we have that problem. We are just spending and spending money that we have and money that we don't have, and we are already destroying the future for the generation that is yet to come. So that's the problem we have right now. That's the big challenge that we have. A government that will be responsible enough to cut its coat according to the cloth that is available and be able to be responsible to the citizens. When the government practices impunity to a level that, no matter what you say as a people, the government is deaf to it, is not listening to you, then we have the kind of problem or situation that we are in Nigeria right now. So that's the situation. It's just that the government that should have been held responsible has not been. Now look at the relationship again between the different arms of government, the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. Now, the thinkers, the originators of democracy and this system of government brought this idea so that there would be checks and balances. Yes, we know that. But now in Nigeria, all of these arms of government are in bed together. Nobody's checking the other one. Okay. The executive, particularly look at what we have experienced in the past 8 years. The executive dabbles into issues of the judiciary and the legislature. The legislature itself accepts anything that the executive arm brings. The judiciary does not uphold the rule of law like it should. So now when we have all three arms of government just focusing in the same direction, not providing the checks and balances which are needed for the betterment of the nation, then you have a government that is ruling for itself, by itself, not for the people. So you have a government that is made up of the ruling class who are ruling for themselves and just benefiting all the advantages of being in government for themselves to the detriment of the rest of the country.
Thank you very much for shedding light on those issues. It is very important. When we are talking, I take out of your submission that corruption is one of the key factors that is hindering economic development in the country. What is the way out, and is the nation doing enough in the fight against this monster?
Thank you. It's really a monster. It really is a monster in Nigeria because it's devouring everything. It's found everywhere, at all levels. At all levels. We are usually talking about the corruption of government. The fact of the matter is corruption is found at all levels in Nigeria. It is a monster. And it's clear, in Nigeria or in any other country, the higher the level of corruption, the poorer the economy will perform. Because it is the funds available, when they are judiciously spent, that will increase the revenue of government and eventually translate into a better life for everybody. Okay. But when available monies are stolen by some people, kept in other countries where those monies are used for the development of their own countries, then it leads to an impoverishing, a further deepening of poverty of the country where such monies are stolen from. Now, simply put, when you steal money from Nigeria and you take it out of Nigeria, you take it to the US, for example. Now, the money is used to continue developing the US. It doesn't sit there idle. Some people will come to the bank and borrow such money and use it to do businesses that would transform their country. But here in Nigeria, such monies that should have been spent for whichever sector becomes unavailable, and it continues to be a problem. This issue of corruption, yes, it's tied to the experience of poverty that we have. And I remember that in coming to government of the past administration, they kept talking about corruption. We are going to eradicate corruption or put it at its lowest level, and we are going to do something about it. But they had 8 years. The jury is out. Nigerians, we all know what we experienced. Was this government able to solve the issue of corruption? It does not take going to school for 4 years to answer that question. We all know the answer. We still have that problem of corruption. That's why you yourself refer to it as a monster. The government is yet to really deal with it, and it's affecting us in every area, every sector of our economy. And dealing with it is not a problem. It's having the political will, having the political will to do it. That's what that's the political will they had in Switzerland at that time. Started out as a third world nation. But the leader of Switzerland at that time, he had that will. He had it. He did not squander it. Unfortunately, we have had presidents in Nigeria who had that goodwill. They squandered it because they lacked the political will. So this guy had the goodwill of the nation, and he had the political will to do it. So he said no to corruption. If you are caught being corrupt, you are gone. There is no appeal, there's nothing you can do about it. No matter how close you are to the leader, no matter how close you are to the head of state, you are gone. But we don't have such standards in Nigeria. Now we have politicians cross-carpeting. If you are in party A and you are caught being corrupt, you jump to party B that's in power so that you can escape your corruption charges. And everybody is seeing these things. Unfortunately, it has real effects on the economy. It is not money that is just there to be spent freely. If you remove a naira from the economy that should have been spent on education or health or security or other infrastructure, it affects everybody every day. Roads that should have been repaired, that should have been well constructed, and they are not well constructed because somebody stole 80% of the money. Eventually the roads are just managed to be
or left uncompleted,
or sometimes they just managed to commission it, and in about 2 months you have potholes which are worse than what was there before they said they were going to repair the roads. So it affects everybody. Now when you ply such roads, it affects not just your health, it affects your car too. Your vehicle that you should be able to drive well without fault for a year, in about 2 months of driving on such roads, your vehicle feels the impact. You yourself as a person, when you are applying such roads repeatedly, your body is feeling the impact. So everybody everywhere feels the impact of corruption. But it's just something that the government needs the political will, needs to have that will to deal with it. It's Nigerians like you and me who are stealing from us. They are not people from space. So we should be able to deal with such things. Now, look at how it's affecting us as regards subsidy. Now, one of the arguments we have that has been used to sell the idea of subsidy to us as Nigerians is that a few people are mismanaging the money that is voted or allocated to subsidy. In other words, the subsidy regime is filled with corruption. And so, we have to remove that subsidy to stop the corruption. Mind you, we just discussed earlier that there's nothing wrong with subsidy on its own. The problem is with the administration of subsidy. Now, what it means is that all of us in Nigeria are suffering for the sins of a few Nigerians. It is not that there's something wrong with subsidy on its own. It's that there are corrupt people around that subsidy regime. So instead of dealing with that issue of corruption, what we have done now is to remove subsidy itself as a whole. And you and me, Nigerians now, everyday Nigerians are suffering. A much better
and that corruption remains a challenge.
Thank you. A much better alternative would have been for the government to deal with corruption itself. Because if you remove money from subsidy, you put it anywhere else. If corruption remains, that corruption is going to affect anywhere else that you put the money. It's not going to get to Nigerians eventually. So it is that issue of corruption that we just must resolve one way or the other. And for me to be very, very honest with you, the situation looks a little bit hopeless as far as corruption is concerned. When you have those who should be in charge of monitoring agencies being accused of corruption, then we have a real big problem on our hands. The premier agency for dealing with corruption in Nigeria right now is EFCC. Now, when you have the director of EFCC itself being accused of corruption, now tell me, what do we do? Are we going to look for angels?
This is a great challenge.
It is. It's a real big problem. Are we going to get angels? Look for angels to help us out in Nigeria? That deals with the enormity of the task of dealing with corruption in Nigeria. It's a monster, just like you said. And unfortunately, It's a monster that is growing bigger and bigger and bigger by the day. We are suffering it. We don't need to remove subsidy. It's this corruption thing. How do we deal with corruption? It's still out. That's what this government is not talking about. Until we deal with that issue, we are still going to have this problem no matter where we allocate money.
Do individual has a role to play in that?
We do. The way to go about it is a little bit different from what is usually advocated. Now, clearly, what we need is a change. Not just a change in spending money, but a change in our attitudes and values as Nigerians. Now, it's not something that is impossible to do. It's the primary task of leadership, right? To lead people through change. So now, what kind of change are we talking about? We want Nigerians to put Nigeria first. If this money belongs to Nigeria, let's spend it for Nigeria. That's what we mean. It belongs to Nigeria, spend it for Nigeria. It belongs to my agency, spend it for my agency. It belongs to my school, spend it for my school.
Transparency and accountability.
Thank you. That's what we are talking about. And that is the role of the government. A government which itself is not transparent, is not accountable, does not make itself open to the people, cannot claim to be fighting corruption. If you get into government and you suddenly become rich and we cannot explain the source of your wealth, if politics continues to be seen as the shortcut to success in Nigeria, then it's going to be really difficult for anybody to sell the idea of battling corruption to us. It's just going to be impossible. If we knew you before you got into government, you were poor, you were just average, and you got into government and all of a sudden you have billions that we can't trace how you got it. Now, how do you want to convince us that you are going to deal with corruption? So that's where we need to start dealing with these issues. Our leaders in Nigeria must be able to tell us openly, this is the source of our wealth. Their wealth must be open to us, how they got into such monies and how such monies have accrued over time. It's not that people just become billionaires overnight because of some government patronage and they start telling us they want to be the ones to solve the problem of corruption. It does not work that way. So the solution must be holistic. We are talking about leadership that is focused on bringing change. It is not impossible to do. It's just that focusing on agencies like ICPC and EFCC alone to bring the change will not work.
Okay, thank you very much. Is the challenge of unemployment poses any effect on economy?
Oh, definitely, of course. When you have, just like we have in Nigeria right now, when you have about 70 to 80% of your people that are either unemployed or underemployed, then you have a real big problem. Unfortunately, no matter which sector of the economy we look at, no matter which sector of Nigeria we look at, we find all these problems which are easy to attack. And it's not because they are just they are there and they can't be solved. It's just because the people that are tasked with solving these problems are not thinking about what to do. Sometimes I get a little bit tired of analyzing these issues because they seem to be huge problems that can't be solved. But it's not like that. It's just that people that should be solving these problems are not really thinking about it. They are not there to solve this problem. They are there to get rich. It's as simple as that. That's why they are not. These problems look intractable. They are not. I remember what the late sage said, Chief Obafemi Awolowo. He said nobody has a monopoly of wisdom. He said, but he was referring to himself. He said, but why other people are just roaming around, carousing around, having an easy life. He said, I go back home, I sit down, and I'm looking for solutions to the problems and challenges confronting the nation. So while other people are at beer parlors, at clubs, are partying around, he said he sits down and he's studying the situation in Nigeria, looking for proven solutions to the problems of Nigeria. And that's why eventually we started referring to him as a sage. So the problems we have in the nation are not intractable. They are not impossible to solve. They are intractable because those that should be solving them are not looking for the real solutions. Now back to the issue of unemployment. Tell me, why should it be impossible for a nation that has a large population of young people that are ready to work, find it difficult to put these people to work? Why should it be impossible? Why should it be impossible for a nation that trains young people, sends them to school, provides at least to some minimum level, provides educational facilities? We know they are graduating. They graduate year on year on year, and we are not providing jobs for them to get into. It's not like they don't want to work. It's that the work is not available. So it's not a problem of the graduates that are coming out now, even though many people have blamed these young people for so many things. It's that the system has not provided for them. There are no jobs there for these young people to do. And how do I know that? When these same young people leave Nigeria, you see them doing things they could not do in Nigeria. They are not committing crime. They are not into prostitution. They leave Nigeria and they work hard, make legitimate money, and create a good life, create good lives for themselves. So it's the issue of the leaders of Nigeria not studying the situation well and looking for real solutions to the problem of unemployment. Now look at it. Without corruption, make money available for young people that want to go into business. When they go into business, create a level playing ground for everybody, such that the government is not protecting anybody from competition. You can venture into any business area that you like, and once you are making legitimate efforts, you are guaranteed of having returns or income. But when you have a situation that government grants are not available, and when they are available, they are used as patronage for children of the elite, and then if you manage to gather money, to scrape money, and you go into business, God forbid that you go into business that is protected by the government for some individuals. If you go into such businesses, you are wasting your time, because everything would be done to make sure the business does not succeed. Now, one of the ways by which you realize you can identify whether a country is doing well or not, and to look at future projections, is to look at what is called the ease of doing business index.
Okay.
Now, this ease of doing business index looks at how easy it is to start a business and to keep it running. Now, I did a study some time ago, and I discovered that it's the countries where you have that score high on that ease of doing business index. The countries are the highest. They are also the most developed countries in the world. The countries that are lowest on that index of doing business, on that ladder or rung, they are the poorest countries in the world. If you go to many of the developed countries, you are a citizen particularly, it's easy for you to open a bank account, it's easy for you to register your business, it's easy for you to get it running. If you come to many of the developing nations of the world, it's a problem for you to open a bank account. As a Nigerian, as a national of that country, it's a problem for you registering your business legally. It's a problem for you meeting all government regulations before you even start your business. So all these hurdles are there before businesses can be started. Now, who is going to start the businesses that would employ citizens that are graduating every year? So you see where the problem is coming from.
And to have its effect on the economy.
Exactly, that's the issue. So people cannot start legitimate businesses easily. And then we have young people who are graduating, who want to work, but there are no jobs that is adequate for them. So that's a conundrum we have found ourselves, and which we need to pay attention to and resolve those matters.
We wonder why some of them resort to damage the facilities that can even bring improvement to the economy of the nation.
Yes.
Okay. Now, what's your take on the mono economy that Nigeria seems to be practicing? Total dependence on the oil. What does the country stand to benefit from diversification?
It's the way out, and like we pointed out earlier, we have these policies that sound well, but we don't execute. That's a problem. The issue of diversification is not new. We have always been hearing it from past governments, from Obasanjo to Yaradua to Jonathan to Buhari. We've been hearing all these things, but nobody has really done anything about it. It sounds good. We need to diversify. We know we should do these things. We know we should do it. That's why I said sometimes I get so tired of talking about these issues. We know these things.
Sometimes in the past, we depend on agriculture. I mean, yes. Instead of our economy.
Yes. So we know these things.
We don't have anything to gain.
I have to refer to the late sage, again, Chief Obafemi Awolowo.
Okay.
He was just so forward thinking that sometimes you wonder how he got that level of insight. At that time,
okay,
when we depended on agriculture alone,
okay,
in southwestern Nigeria. I'm sure you can recall some of the things that
yes,
he did.
Go ahead.
That was when he decided that we are going to move away from agriculture alone. He started Odua, do you remember?
Yes.
He started Odua investment to move away from total dependence on agriculture alone. Now that's what a forward-thinking leader should do. And that's the way out for present day Nigeria. It is not something that is impossible to do. But the easy money that we get from oil, which is squandered again, is what has brought us to the problem, to the point that we are in right now. To diversify is not something the government needs to start consulting and thinking about all the time. The things to do are there. It's being ready to do it that is the problem. Now, we just discussed about millions of Nigerians that have nothing to do. And you see them all over social media trying to make a means for themselves. Why don't we invest heavily in these areas? People have talked about entertainment, about technology. You have Nigerians making waves in these areas right now. Why don't we invest in these things instead of just focusing on oil alone? And it's dangerous for us to continue focusing on oil alone because of what's happening in the world right now.
Okay.
The world is moving away from fossil fuels,
Exactly.
And it's moving towards renewable energy. So the earlier we move away from fossil fuels, the better for us. Or else that time will come at some point in the future where the world does not need as much oil as it needs today, and it's going to be a problem. So that's why you find many of the countries in Asia now that are moving away, in the East, that are moving away from dependence on oil. See countries like Saudi Arabia, like Qatar, trying to create other industries for themselves apart from oil. So that if that time comes, when the world does not depend on oil as it does right now, there will be something for the country to live on. So they are making a lot of money from other sectors like tourism, for example. They are making a lot of money from it besides the money they are still making on in oil. So they are investing for the future, moving money out of oil into other sectors that will sustain their economy in future generations. So that's what we should do. It's so straightforward, it's so elementary. You are wondering why are we not doing it in Nigeria. So it's not about knowing what to do. It's just many times you are thinking of the lack of political will. We use our government to settle political scores. We just want to be there, to settle our friends, our colleagues, people around us, our family members. We see government as a system of patronage. We are using it to settle ourselves. Come and eat, you to come chop now. That's what we are using government for. Instead of focusing on creating a better future for the nation and making life livable for Nigerians right now. So when we have that focus, then things are going to get a lot better in Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's also look at the challenge of power supply in the country. Definitely it is affecting the economy of the country. What's the way out?
Now, this present government is taking the right steps. Now, the new act, the Electricity Act, the new act empowers individuals and even state governments to generate electricity and even sell up to a point. It's the right step in the right direction. No country can develop without power. That's it's so plain, it's so obvious no country can develop without power. And we have this problem again because of what we have discussed about corruption. But the earlier we solve that problem, the better. And that's why we just cannot help but commend this right step in the right direction by the present government. Allowing individuals, allowing state governments to generate power is something that will help. Over time, we have observed that there's just too much in that exclusive list. Exclusive list. To the federal government. If it would have paid us better, if we have allowed many of these things to be handled by either states or even individuals. Putting the generation of power in that exclusive list has been to the detriment of Nigerians. Some people have argued that there were political considerations in all of these things. Whether true or not, this gradual dissolution of power, of political power I mean now, is going to help Nigeria eventually. Because now that we have allowed, we are allowing other actors to come into the generation of power, we hope that it's going to result in better electricity provision for Nigerians. It's going to result in cheaper electricity, cheaper power for Nigerians. Because when these things are available, then creating companies, starting industries will also become easier for Nigerians.
Okay, as we are running up, what type of changes that Nigerians require? The type of economic, what type of economic transformation do they require?
Yes, I understand your point. That question, the reason why I made that sound was because you are asking a question that speaks to the very heart of all Nigerians. What do we hope for? What do we want? Nigerians are not looking for, the common Nigerian is not trying to become a billionaire overnight. What do we want? Create a level playing ground for everybody. Let people be able to find their own space. Let people be able to find their own place. Let's have an open society. That's how it's referred to. Technically, let's have an open society so that people can find decent jobs, create decent life for themselves, live in decent, livable homes. They can make money that would sustain them and their families, provide good education, make health facilities adequate and efficient, provide good security. These are the basic things that Nigerians are asking for. And once you provide these things, it's going to have a ripple effect on every other aspect of the economy. We are just hoping that this president will be able to get it right. Because when he gets it right, it's going to be to the advantage of all Nigerians. Okay, that's the type of economic reforms that Nigerians are yearning for. Thank you. Viewers, this is the complete point to wrap up this edition of the program. Special thanks to my guest, Dr. Gbenga Ajayi, for coming on the program. Thank you for having me. It's been wonderful to have you on the program. Thank you so much. Viewers, until next Sunday when we bring another fresh edition of the program. Say stay blessed. I am Adibare Ejimagide and the executive producer is Akinola Owolabi. Goodbye.